Welcome to part 2 of my Tsubasa RESERVoir CHRoNiCLE Season 1 Anime vs. Manga comparison. In the last video, we covered episodes 1 to 12 with Clow-Fog Country through Fog Country, and this time we're going to cover episodes 13 through 26 from Jade Country all the way to Tsarastora Country. So, let's get into it. Episode 13 covers chapters 25 through 28. The episode opens showing the snow-covered Jade Country and the group in Jade clothing walking toward the town of Spirit. This sequence skips almost an entire chapter where the group won enough money through Sakura's luck and gambling to afford Jade clothes and horses they would then use to travel to Spirit after hearing about the Emerald legend. So the anime lacks those horses, and the clothing for the characters is slightly different, with Sakura having blue jewels instead of flower patterns, Vi's hat being a slightly different shape, and his outerwear lacking a chain, among other small details. This dialogue sequence omits much from the manga and adds a segment between Mokona and CHRoNiCLE. The anime now covers the omitted legends in a flashback and adds a window in the back rather than just shimmering light. The anime shows gravestones outside the castle. The manga showed the dead parents inside the castle. The path to the castle has one less turn in the anime, and the children's outfits are slightly different, with two wearing nightcaps. Also, there are far less children in the anime's depiction. The ending to this flashback lacks lines by the group, as the group is just listening to the tale from the table over instead of being told the story directly as in the manga. As such, the dialogue in the sequence is altered. Also, the group has their Jade clothes here, but in the manga they didn't purchase these yet. The anime adds some lines to start this conversation and changes most of the dialogue. The anime omits the entire sequence where the group discerns the name of the town, showing Sharon can read a bit of English. The layout of the town is initially different, with a straight line of houses in the anime versus a spread out rural layout in the manga, though this line of houses is present in the manga a bit on the far side of the town. Also, the sequence of the townsfolk hiding from the group is slightly different in the anime, and the anime lacks the group trying to talk to a little girl, hence some dialogue is different or cut. In addition to the outfits and poses of the townsfolk being slightly different, the anime only has one man with a gun, whereas the manga had several guns present. This conversation is altered between accounts, with some lines added, others cut, and others slightly changed or reordered. Also, this line about CHRoNiCLE might be different. Mokona bites CHRoNiCLE. In the manga, she headbutts him. CHRoNiCLE grabs Mokona here, keeping her exposed through the next scene. In the manga, he doesn't grab her for a while, thereby keeping her hidden. Dr. Kyle's lines are altered and cut, mostly in line with the lack of guns in the anime. Also, his last lines are moved to when the group is in the building in the anime. Some lines are reordered, altered, or slightly cut in the sequence, with Dr. Kyle and also with Mr. Glossom. Also, I'm just going to summarize that since Mr. Glossom's outfit is also slightly altered, that everyone's attire is slightly different in the anime. The anime doesn't use a flashback for this segment as in the manga. The final line of this conversation is changed entirely, and the anime adds a shot of Dr. Kyle clenching his fist. The dialogue here is slightly different, in line with the bite instead of the headbutt. Vi is standing at the window at the start of this conversation. In the manga, he is shown walking up to it with a lantern. This conversation also has lines cut or altered and lacks the lantern emphasis. Sharon catches her falling forward. In the manga, he caught her falling backward. The exterior is shown instead of just the window. The anime has Sakura step out of bed to walk to the window. In the manga, there is a large window next to the bed. The anime also places added emphasis on the crows. The anime shows Emerald's face. The manga doesn't reveal this until later. Also, the anime appears to have Sakura hold only one hand to the glass, whereas the manga had both hands on the glass. CHRoNiCLE's demeanor is different in the anime, and the anime doesn't have him approach the window with Vi stepping back as in the manga. While a line might be reordered, the anime doesn't have Sharon bow to Sakura here. Sakura's motions and dialogue are slightly changed in the anime versus the manga, with closed eyes in the anime. Meanwhile, Mokona doesn't leave her arms to say morning as in the manga. The anime lacks the group remembering the child they encountered before, since this was omitted in the anime. Also, some lines are altered or cut in the anime throughout the scene, and some visuals are also changed slightly. The townsfolk shown here are different than in the manga. The anime adds lines by Sakura and a town member. The anime omits Dr. Kyle's arm gesture, a defense for the group. The anime adds lines by Sharon and the town member. The anime adds a conversation here in place of another one in the manga. The anime reorders slightly shots of the crow scene and extends it slightly. The anime lacks Dr. Kyle's shocked reaction and the food that the manga shows. Also, some lines are cut and altered for the ensuing conversation. The anime adds another stained glass background here instead of just showing Dr. Kyle. The way the story ends might be slightly different between accounts. The anime cuts a line by Dr. Kyle. The anime adds a line by Dr. Kyle. The anime skips to the scene of Sharon able to dodge tree branches while reading the book, but of course lacks the horses from the manga. Also, dialogue is added, cut, and altered here. But more importantly, to set up the anime's unique subplot, Dr. Kyle gave the group his own copy of the history book that will later be shown to lack information another copy has. In the manga, the group is told by Dr. Kyle to head to the mayor's house to attain a copy of the history book before they then head to the old castle, though this copy is later revealed to have been redacted by Dr. Kyle after borrowing it earlier. In addition to more lines being cut or altered, the bridge to the castle was partially intact in the anime versus completely gone on the town side in the manga. The bridge structure is also slightly changed. Dialogue is changed or cut as a result of the anime showing Mr. Glossom here near the castle versus noticing him while on the way back to the town in the manga. More lines are cut and others are added or changed in the continuing conversations, in part due to the change of where they got the book from. Also, the girl's hair is lighter in the anime versus darker in the manga. Also, her demeanor is happier in the anime versus teary-eyed in the manga. The anime reorders and changes or cuts some lines here. The anime changes some lines here but delivers the same meaning. The anime adds a unique scene with Sakura and Sharon by the fireplace, and then another unique scene where they talk to Dr. Kyle. Sakura speaks these lines in the anime rather than thinking them in the manga. Also, a line is cut. The anime adds emphasis on the crows before Emerald appears again, and the emphasis on Emerald is different. While the visuals are slightly different, the main change here is all the kids have shoes on, whereas they were seen or implied barefoot in the manga. Again, the anime shows her face before the manga's reveal. The anime shows Sakura's door is locked from the unique scene prior, hence why she had to leave via the window. In the manga, she left through the window to ensure she didn't lose the children, who were already nearing the edge of town. Also, some lines are slightly changed between accounts. The anime shows Emerald following the children rather than leading them in the manga. Unless I am reading this wrong, Sakura speaks this in the anime but thinks it in the manga. Also, a line is cut and the first line might be changed slightly. The anime lacks Emerald's outstretched arms when the crows caw. Also, the anime doesn't show the water levels either lowering or at the least becoming calm before the children walk across it. While Emerald may turn around in the manga, it is not emphasized as such in the manga. Also, a line is added in the anime. Sakura falls to the side. In the manga, she falls backward. The anime adds lines by Emerald. The manga doesn't have her speak until she tries to give Sakura back her feather. The anime skips the intro portion of the scene where the others enter Sakura's room. The anime has Sharon and the others come down the stairs to encounter the townsfolk. The manga has the townsfolk rush up the stairs instead. The anime specifies 5 children disappeared. The manga says 7 did. Also, the dialogue in the scene is altered and reordered with some lines cut or given to other characters. The attack scene is also altered, showing the townsfolk rush the stairs and then miss at attacking 5 before Sharon disarms the leader. Also, the anime has Kurogane catch the gun a ways away from the leader, while the manga has him pin the leader to the ground at gunpoint. The line might be altered a bit too to make it more vague. Additional dialogue is also changed, and lines are added by Mokona, who was still in hiding during the manga's account. The anime adds a unique shot of Sakura in the castle. Episode 14 covers chapters 28 through 30. Several portions of this conversation are cut or reordered, and the anime adds extra lines toward the end. The anime inserts a conversation with the townsfolk, adapting a later conversation from the manga as the group near the castle with the leader. As such, several portions are changed. The anime cuts to Sakura waking up. In the manga, this doesn't occur for several more pages. Sakura's pose is different between accounts. Also, the anime cuts some lines and changes the portrait of Emerald to a bust. As such, a line is changed. The anime has all the kids wearing shoes and their clothes are neat. In the manga, they were all barefoot and their clothes and skin were worn from digging. The anime adds extra emphasis on the bust. The anime doesn't specify the one girl from earlier here as the manga does. This conversation has been significantly altered with lines cut and added to make Dr. Kyle seem innocent. The anime also merges a conversation with the town patrol leader with this conversation, having Dr. Kyle field these questions instead of the leader after Shaoran discussed some details with the mayor. This also changes some dialogue, especially regarding Dr. Kyle, as the anime says the townsfolk are negotiating with Mr. Glossom, but the manga said Dr. Kyle negotiated, hence why the townsfolk haven't been kicked out. All this to say, the reasons for not suspecting Dr. Kyle are different between accounts. I'll also note that in the manga, the leader sticks with the group for several more scenes, but this isn't the case in the anime. The anime adds a unique portion to the conversation as Dr. Kyle places a red herring about Mr. Glossom. The anime then adds a unique conversation as the group considers this new information. The anime cuts some lines and moves straight to Sakura pulling the chain. The anime also adds extra lines and another emphasis on the bust. The anime cuts to the scene at Mr. Glossom's house instead of finishing the Sakura scene first. Also, the anime adds the fact that no one is home at the moment, leading to a unique scene sequence for a while. This includes several changes, such as the group gaining a second copy of the history book, which helps show Dr. Kyle lied to them, and that Mr. Glossom had blueprints of the castle, thereby placing suspicion on him. Meanwhile, the manga had them go back to the mayor's house instead. The anime had Mr. Glossom compile a list of the missing children. In the manga, the mayor compiled this list in the town records, hence it was in a booklet instead of a single piece of paper. The anime actually shows us the group gaining an unredacted copy of the history book from Mr. Glossom's house, albeit in a different manner than implied in the manga, that being an off-screen cooperative conversation rather than sneaking in. The blueprints of the castle are large and spread out on Mr. Glossom's desk. In the manga, they were only in the history book, so we never saw them. This unique conversation serves to explain why the ending to the legend was cryptic, almost to imply the children died. The manga never had such an explanation that silence was a virtue, and so will not have this added meaning when the group tells the townsfolk to spread the true ending to the legend. The anime has a unique conversation, but does get back on track with Shaoran face-planting in the snow, albeit with additional altered and unique dialogue. However, in the anime, he is reading the unredacted history book, whereas in the manga, he was reading that town record of missing children. When Kurogane picks up Shaoran, he isn't still reading as in the manga. Mokona is on Kurogane's head. In the manga, she was in his coat. Fi is given extra lines. Another line by Sakura is cut. Also, her trying to open the door is moved here, whereas the manga had this occur before trying to remove the chain from the bed. Sakura is given extra lines. In the manga, she never lost her resolve for a second. Also, the anime loves emphasizing that bust. The anime adds a unique scene of Shaoran noticing the differences between the history books. In the manga, this isn't revealed until the big Dr. Kyle did it scene. Shaoran sees a girl, her appearance is altered slightly too, by the closed second floor window, immediately noticing a blackbird. In the manga, Shaoran first notices the girl in bed on the first floor, and the scene is longer, with comments about when Dr. Kyle arrived, and also the showing of the girl walking to the open window and almost crawling outside. The anime also uniquely adds emphasis on Shaoran noticing something is up, and also Dr. Kyle guiding the girl back away from the window. This line might be changed, but the greater change is that Shaoran is approaching Dr. Kyle for medical attention, whereas in the manga, Shaoran was already in Dr. Kyle's office snooping around when Dr. Kyle came in, wondering what Shaoran was doing in his office. This conversation has plenty of lines cut, altered, or added, placing less emphasis on Mr. Glossom, but still a good deal. One change of note is the anime lacks the specification that the townsfolk volunteers were said to be the ones watching Mr. Glossom that night. The anime also doesn't make Dr. Kyle look as shocked to consider Mr. Glossom as the culprit. Here is just another shot of how the town's layout is slightly different in the anime. The anime adds a scene of Dr. Kyle in his office as he heads out to follow the quote-unquote child. The anime now cuts back to Sakura's room escape. In the manga, she escaped hours ago. The obstruction in the anime is a legitimate blocking beam, whereas it was a thin wooden pole angled from the floor in the manga. Also, Sakura is given extra lines as she fails to pull the beam away. Meanwhile, in the manga, she got the pole free in one shot. The anime adds a unique scene of firing CHRoNiCLE at the river dam. The breaking of the dam serving to cause the flood later because it couldn't be raised again, whereas in the manga, no one went back to raise it in time. Also in the manga, this was only mentioned to have occurred when they confronted Dr. Kyle. Since Sakura just now freed herself, she isn't right behind the children on the way down the stairs as in the manga. The room layout is somewhat different in the anime with far less debris. Also, the swing set's location might be different. The anime also has Sakura's feathers sealed in a magic crystal in the middle of the room. This change also affects why the children are needed, with it being some sort of magic ritual and clever cover in the anime. This is far different from the manga, which had the feather in an adjacent chamber hidden behind a portrait and only accessible by a child through a small hole in the wall. In this chamber was a crystal pillar, but this was being broken one rock smash at a time by the children, hence a more practical need for them in the manga. Due to all this, the dialogue here is much different, including the initial dialogue with Princess Emerald. The legend is told via flashback stained glass instead of just showing Emerald talking for two separate scenes. In the manga, the bulk of the legend is mentioned later when Sakura is at knife point by Dr. Kyle. Also, the legend is changed in the anime with people fighting over the feather's power, eventually leading to Emerald's parents dying in the conflict. And the epidemic that followed, which affected only children, was considered divine retribution for the conflict. After the feather healed the children and they were returned, Emerald sealed the feather away with all the magic left in the country, thereby explaining the crystallization. The manga account is rather different. The king and queen died in an accident, and soon after, the disease came upon the land's children. Only then did the feather float down to her, which she used to help heal the children before returning them later after the famine was over. Aside from the feather, there was never any mention of magic in Jade, so how the feather was crystallized, I have no idea. The anime uniquely extends this conversation with Emerald's comments on how silence was considered a virtue and how someone else is bringing the legend back. Hence, she has been trying to stop him by going to the town. The manga never really gives an explanation for why Emerald went to the town or why she appeared to lead the children to the castle rather than follow them. The anime uniquely adds a flashback again. The anime blends the scene back with the manga's earlier one while adding more lines and uniquely showing that Sakura's presence will finally be enough to release the feather from its steeple. In the manga, the children offer the feather to Sakura immediately after digging it out. The anime now cuts back to the scene with Dr. Kyle, which occurred before the last feather scene in the manga. The anime shows Shaoran, Fire, and CHRoNiCLE present. In the manga, only Shaoran was present, with Mr. Glossom showing up almost immediately, and then Fire and CHRoNiCLE arriving a little later. As such, some dialogue is edited in this scene, featuring accusations immediately instead of Dr. Kyle's initial defense of himself, which we'll see in the next episode. Episode 15 covers chapters 29 to 32. As mentioned, the dialogue in this scene is changed quite a bit due to the presence of other characters among other factors, with added lines, altered lines, cut lines, reattributed lines, etc. Also, the child, quote-unquote, is still standing as an illusion here in the anime before CHRoNiCLE reveals the deception. In the manga, this child already fell apart, revealing the trick before Dr. Kyle was accused. Additionally, the manga waits several more pages to reveal Mokona was the child, as she continues to stay hidden in this country. Mr. Glossom only now shows up, again changing more dialogue as a result. In the manga, he showed up far earlier, almost immediately into Shaoran's accusations. Also, in the anime, Mr. Glossom brought the townsfolk group, whereas the manga had their leader present but not the rest of the group. Dr. Kyle's lines are changed here. Also, since the reasoning for the children being taken to the castle is different, more lines are changed too. More lines are changed and the conversation shifts to the feather concern. In the manga, Dr. Kyle focuses instead on the people not knowing enough about him before taking off toward the castle. The anime cuts to a unique scene with Sakura where the children are seen returning to their living quarters. In the manga, the children never do so, meaning the townsfolk discover them in the main chamber instead of the quarters later. The anime adds more on a unique scene sequence regarding Dr. Kyle going after the feather. The manga doesn't place any focus on this until the group is leaving Jade, and considering how Dr. Kyle knew about the feather, which wasn't itself in the history books. The anime omits Mokona sneakily throwing glowing dust made from the sunfish scale onto Dr. Kyle as he entered the river, thereby showing his footprints glowing, revealing the hidden path. Instead, the anime just has them notice the water level was lowered, and so they can faintly see the path. These changes also change some dialogue. Sharon is given an extra line. Emerald is leading Sakura out of the castle, meanwhile the group follows the footprints to the children at the quarters. In the manga, she hadn't left the main chamber with the children, so when everyone catches up to her, they discover the children there. As such, much dialogue and scenes here are unique to the anime. Also of note is that in the manga, they do pass the quarters, but they are empty given the children's location. Also, since the anime omitted the sunfish scale scene, there was no scene of Dr. Kyle having removed his shoes due to noticing the trail. Sakura bumps into Dr. Kyle instead of him rushing into the same room. Also, the conversation omits Dr. Kyle's slip of knowing Sakura is barefoot, giving himself away, and instead has Emerald warn Sakura of Dr. Kyle. So much more dialogue is different given the different context of these accounts. Dr. Kyle holds Sakura at gunpoint. In the manga, he holds her at knife point. The anime also reduces the scene to Dr. Kyle demanding the feather, whereas the manga shows he wants to rule all of Jade Country with the feather's power, and then moves into an explanation of the legend with Sakura correcting the tale a bit while talking to Emerald. Meanwhile, when Dr. Kyle attempts to kill Sakura and Sharon saves her, he is injured by the bullet instead of the knife. Sharon is given an extra line. Kurogane says this line instead of Mokona. The dialogue reactions here are different and more calm, and the anime also adds a flashback, showing the anime's slightly unique cause of the flooding with additional unique dialogue to match. Additional lines are also cut and added. The anime changes the scene of the two trying to escape, with them coming to a crossroads before the path caves in, rather than Sharon knowing a hidden path behind a false wall before that path caves in. As such, some dialogue is changed afterward regarding directions to escape, among other lines. Emerald is given extra lines, and Sharon is given an added reaction, among other dialogue changes. Also, the anime shows more of the room the hidden door is in, with a statue of Emerald in the room. Sakura is touching the door in the anime versus banging on it in the manga. Also, the anime extends this conversation. The anime hasn't had the flood waters follow the path the two traveled. Hence, when the door opens, the anime doesn't include rushing water as in the manga. Dr. Kyle's scene is altered regarding dialogue and how he supposedly dies, lacking the foot injury the manga shows since he never took off his shoes. The anime omits the first lines of this conversation. The anime shifts the line by 5 to a little later. The dialogue here is changed and the anime uniquely extends the conversation. When Emerald appears, she cracks the crystal, freeing the feather. In the manga, there are first more dialogue lines and Emerald watching over the children before she melts the crystal, freeing the feather. Also, Sharon is given an extra line in the anime. The anime extends the scene with some altered dialogue, with Sakura remaining conscious through it. In the manga, she is drifting into sleep while Emerald warns of someone watching them. Sakura immediately relays the warning, leading to the anime's ensuing conversation. In the manga, she relayed it after waking up later. The anime then blends a few scenes, one when Sakura was asleep in the manga, and two after she wakes up, hence the dialogue is altered. Mokona goes for a face hug attack. In the manga, she slaps Kurogane's shoulder. The anime now covers the children returning, which occurred first in this chapter for the manga. Meanwhile, several visuals are changed, including again the lack of shoes and the worn clothes and the townsfolk present and shown. The group is standing in the street while watching the children return. In the manga, they are inside watching from a window. The anime omits the first part of this conversation. Meanwhile, the anime changes the dialogue a bit, re-emphasizing the silence is a virtue concept. The anime adds a really long shot of this building exterior. This conversation is altered, removing the focus on the group writing a book and the curiosities about their backgrounds. Other lines are also cut or slightly changed in the continuing scene. The paper was folded atop the book. In the manga, it wasn't folded. The book is still on the bed. In the manga, Mr. Glossom picked it up too. The anime completely cuts the note's explanation of the legend and changes some lines. The anime adds a unique scene intro to this conversation, with Mokona ready to go to the next world. This as such changes a bit of dialogue as they contemplate Emerald's warning. Other dialogue is also changed slightly as the group wonders about Dr. Kyle knowing specifically about Sakura's feather, rather than just knowing about a magic feather that wasn't in the histories of the country. This change would place further suspicion that the person watching them also informed Dr. Kyle, but this suspicion isn't in the manga. The anime lacks the binocular effects the manga shows. It also does show Faye is communicating with this agent through the spirit sign. The anime also lacks one of Faye's servants holding up the video chat device and instead has CHRoNiCLE standing next to Faye. In the manga, she was at the small table closer to the magic mirror. The ending dialogue to this conversation is also different. The anime adds a unique scene of the group traveling through dimensions before covering one line omitted earlier by Faye in the anime. Episode 16 has no manga equivalent. The anime includes another unique hourglass monologue, followed by an entirely unique journey through Storm Country. In the manga, the group moves straight onto Oto Country, and so shall we. Episode 17 covers chapters 33 through 34. The anime cuts a line by Toya. The ensuing conversation also has many lines changed or cut due to the nature of the prior attack. Also in the anime, Toya is shown without clothes but bandages over his wounds. In the manga, since he was poisoned and left unconscious during the battle, he didn't receive such injuries in the fighting, and so the bandages aren't present, and he wears his royal clothes instead. Additionally, the flashback sequence is different based on the differing accounts. Just to summarize, in case more show up in the future, but the outfits are always different in flashbacks to the youth in the anime. Anyway, more lines are cut or changed during the rest of this conversation. Yukito says this line, and the manga Clow said it in the flashback. The anime adds a unique scene of Fei Wong and Xinhua. The anime has them emerge through the dimensional wormhole. In the manga, Mokona arrives first and then spits the group out in Oto. Also, Mokona is given an extra line. Girl A grabs Sharon in the anime, but Fi in the manga. Girl B grabs Sakura in both accounts. Girl C grabs Kurogane in the anime, but Sharon in the manga. And Girl D grabs Fi in the anime, but Kurogane in the manga. Also, some lines are cut or reordered or added, and other lines are reattributed to other characters. The anime adds extra emphasis to the sign. It may be changed slightly, but I don't have a Japanese volume to confirm. This may not be a change since the manga is in black and white, but Blanche's hair color is orange in the anime, but in Angelic Layer it was bright yellow. Anyway, she is given extra lines, with Fi having a line cut and Sharon's line being said by Fi instead. The continued conversation is altered. And at this point, I'm kind of sick of saying all the specificities here, and the anime adds so many changes into these conversations. So I'm going to start summarizing conversations are altered when multiple lines fall under the cut, added, changed, reordered, or reattributed categories. So in this specific continued conversation that is altered, it is altered by being cut and added. Lines are cut, lines are also added. When Kurogane stands up, Sakura grabs Mokona in surprise. In the manga, Mokona jumps as the two jolt in surprise. The ensuing conversation is altered, added and cut. Also, Sakura isn't about to pass out in the anime, and so Mokona doesn't bring her a pillow either, but instead will hop next to Fi. Fi lies back on his coat. In the manga, he curls up forward on it. Mokona has to push herself to sense the feather. This isn't so in the manga. Also, the anime has a peaceful end to this conversation and adds a unique scene of the group resting before the demon attacks. In the manga, the demon attacks mid-conversation. Also, the demon's appearance is altered. Sakura is given an extra line. In the manga, she is still unconscious as Kurogane rushes her to safety. The anime adds an extra shine emphasis to Sharon's eye not seen in the manga. The conversation is altered, added, reordered, changed, cut. The anime adds emphasis on Kurogane knowing he saw Sharon's weakness. The conversation is altered, cut, changed, added. The anime adds a shot of the residents of Oto here. The anime lacks the crossover reference to Ashura and Yasha here. While on the subject, the anime omits several other crossover characters, see my crossover character video for a full list of those omitted, those whose pictures are straight from the manga. While the conversation is still altered as mentioned before, of note is the anime specifically cutting the rank of the demon they defeated, as the ranking system isn't covered in depth until later. Also, much of the end to the conversation is cut and covered slightly differently in the anime by the characters relaying that cut information instead in later scenes. The locations of the characters are different in the scene, and the conversation is altered in parts due to the last point I mentioned. These alterations including changed, cut, and added. The anime specifically cuts Fi's treating of Kurogane as a dog, losing the foreshadowing to the names Fi picked out for the group. Additionally, of note, the manga specifies the currency of Oto as yen, but the anime doesn't, simplifying it as digital currency recorded on a cherry blossom token. Also, Sakura is awake here, but in the manga she doesn't wake up until the group is fixing out the building to be a cafe. Hence, much of the conversation is altered in line with these changes. Further results of these changes are the next part of the conversation between Kurogane and Sharon being moved to later in the anime, and now Sakura showing up in her maid outfit earlier than the manga's depiction. This outfit is also different between accounts, and the scene's conversation is altered in part due to these changes. Changed, added, cut, and reordered in this alteration. I have to specify here Kurogane whistles at Sakura's outfit in the anime only. The anime omits a flashback panel. How the cakes come out of Mokona is visualized differently between accounts. Also, the continued conversation is altered. Reordered, cut, retributed, added. The anime adds Fi tapping on Kurogane to get him to turn around, leading to a slightly different depiction of forcing in of the cake. The anime extends the scene, creating a more fluid lead-in to this flashback which the manga covered earlier while Sakura was asleep. This conversation and scene sequence is altered, with most portions of it cut in the anime and some added. Of note is the removal of Fujitaka explaining Sharon's injury was due to being blind in one eye, but since the anime hasn't covered this yet, this isn't included. Also, the anime has Fujitaka holding Sharon's hand. In the manga, Sharon is carrying towels, but Fujitaka takes notice of the injured hand without touching it. The anime lacks steam coming from the tea. Also, Fujitaka places the tea tray on the table instead of on the bed between the two. The anime places added emphasis on Sharon. Sakura's smile is depicted differently between accounts. While the shot of the town is different, the main difference is the light post has 3 lights instead of 2. The 2 are in the middle of the alley. In the manga, they are at the entrance to an alley or a side street. The beginning of this conversation is cut. The conversation is extended and altered in large part due to Fi being present and observing from the sidelines, but also since the anime is now partially adapting that cut conversation from earlier and the cut information Blanche gave. In the manga, Fi was back at the cafe. The demons appear different between accounts. Sharon's attack is different between accounts as the attack sequence is extended and altered as Kurogane shows Fi that Sharon is partially blind. In the manga, this was already established, so Kurogane comments on Sharon's fighting style mid-battle instead. Kurogane's attack is to defend Sharon in the anime. In the manga, is to defend himself. Also, the anime still has enemies to fight after this attack. In the manga, Kurogane's attack was upon the final demons present. As the anime continues to blend scenes, the conversation is altered, but of note is it cuts Kurogane grabbing Sharon's hair and also Kurogane's explanations for some of Sharon's actions in previous worlds. The anime then slightly extends the fight. The anime blends these scenes together some more, as such the conversation is altered, changed, added. The building they are standing on is different between accounts. Episode 18 covers chapters 35 through 37 and Holic chapter 22. Yuzuriha's eyes aren't closed for this intro in the anime. The anime gives Sharon an extra line and omits him petting Inuki. Kusanagi's line might be changed, but Kurogane's line definitely is, involving Fi in the conversation instead of how the manga portrays the scene. With Fi here, more of the conversation is altered, added. Also, Kurogane holds his sword horizontally in the anime and vertically in the manga. The reactions are different here than in the mangas. Since Fi was with the others in the anime, he isn't at the shop painting with Sakura and Mokona as in the manga. Also, this change partially affects why this next conversation is altered, changed, cut, added, as Kurogane is chasing Fi at the start instead of just confronting him, prompting reactions from the others. But the manga does have Fi chase later while holding the sign he was working on. The anime also omits Inuki walking in with Shaoran. Fai's drawings are different, with more features resembling the group in the anime versus more generic images in the manga regarding the dogs. But for himself, the anime omits the black cat shading and the whiskers, but Little Cat is identical to the manga. Mokona is given an extra line, and the sign is on the ground instead of in Fai's hand. Kurogane grabs the mop. In the manga, he unsheathed his sword. Also, the location in the cafe of this chase is specified in the anime. Sakura is given a smile in the anime, and Yuzuriha is given an extra line. Mokona has stopped Kurogane. In the manga, Fai is dodging an attack while saying this. The anime splits this line, and the manga they talk in unison. That Mokona change leads to this anime-only shot of Kurogane. The cake is cut open in the anime, but not in the manga. The teacups are different between accounts. Also, the anime has Sakura slide the cup over the counter since she stood behind it, whereas in the manga she handed it to Yuzuriha as Sakura walked up from the same side of the counter. The anime cuts a line by Fai in line with another cut about the demon ranks from earlier, hence a line by Kusanagi is added instead. Yuzuriha is still pointing instead of clenching her fists in excitement. The anime omits lines by Yuzuriha. The anime uniquely drags out Sakura's reaction here. The anime cuts a line by Fai. The anime adds a line by Mokona. The conversation is altered, added, changed. This scene also lacks the continued chasing of Fai by Kurogane. The anime adds a scenic shot. When Sakura brings the hot chocolate, the anime omits the teacup for refills. As usual, the anime extends the flashback sequence instead of having Sakura cover it in a few lines. The anime omits a line by Shaoran. Also, Sakura only places one hand forward instead of both as in the manga. The anime adds an image of Shaoran fading away. The anime adds extra emphasis on the tray dropping. In the manga, the tray wasn't on her and so didn't drop. Fai is looking away in the anime instead of into the room as in the manga. The shot of Yuko has her turning and giggling in the anime versus a standard serious pose in the manga. The anime lacks a flashback image to Hanshin. The positioning of the two and the depiction of the demons has changed between accounts. The anime uniquely adds Fai playing darts, foreshadowing his use of them as weapons later. In the manga, he is preparing breakfast. The anime also cuts lines by Fai in this conversation and embellishments by the two. Sakura's reaction is calmer rather than shock in the manga. Also, some lines are added and some small portions are cut. Sakura is prompted by the first aid kit to ask about injuries. In the manga, there was no kit, she just naturally asked the question. The food is slightly different between accounts, and a couple background lines are cut. The anime cuts Sakura's reaction. I will just summarize for all of Oto that many background characters are changed. Mokona is on Shaoran's shoulder. In the manga, she was on his head. Since the anime explained the token earlier, some lines are changed slightly here. Also, Mokona is still with Shaoran instead of messing with Kurogane, hence some other lines are added or cut. The anime gives Blanche an extra line. Again, the anime doesn't have Kurogane with Mokona, in this case pulling her ears. The anime cuts lines by Shaoran. Some lines are changed here. The anime introduces Eri instantly. The manga has a fight scene with her guards first. As such, some dialogue is changed or cut here and in the ensuing conversation. The conversation is altered, cut, added, changed, reattributed. For example, the anime cuts introductions for Takashi and Kintaro, and Eri hitting them with her mallets along with significant portions of the conversation as she knows of their exploits. The anime also lacks a segment where they locate the clover bar on a map. The anime finally cuts a scene where Eri demands payment for the information. The anime adds a unique scene of Fai and Kurogane heading to Clover. In the manga, they don't go to Clover until after a scene at the cafe. The anime cuts a scene of Shaoran returning and of Kurogane wanting to change their names. This manga scene would foreshadow that Oto is a game. Sakura isn't lovingly embarrassed in this shot. When Sakura notices the bandages, Shaoran's arm is raised. It was lowered in the manga. Also, the rest of the conversation is either cut or slightly changed regarding when a line is said. The anime shows Mokona's conversation with Yuko now instead of a ways into the next scene with Ryuo. But more importantly, this conversation was actually adapted from the Holic manga, as it wasn't shown in Tsubasa. Hence, we see it from Mokona's perspective instead of Yuko's. Also, the conversation is altered, cut, and added, with the ending cut and only slightly relayed later, like in the manga, as Mokona says Yuko says the name of the cafe, the Cat's Eye. Meanwhile, I gotta curse the dub here for a moment. They cut the white day line, making the calendar shot pointless. The anime adds a unique shot of the calendar. The anime changes the first part of the scene, adding a sneeze cliche. Kurogane motions that he'll unsheath his sword if Fi doesn't stop. In the manga, Kurogane actually unsheathed it. Fi's facial expression is rather different between accounts. The appearance of the demons has once again changed between accounts. The anime omits Fi looking at the map and some accompanying lines. The pose Kurogane is in is different between accounts. The anime adds a strike by the demon. The anime adds a scene of the two trying to get used to the Oto names, though oddly enough, the dub version is a loose adaptation of that cut conversation portion from earlier. Mokona calls the two over to show them the updated sign, as Yuko said it should be called the Cat's Eye. In the manga, Mokona doesn't come down until she hears the commotion of Ryuo and Shaoran's fight. Also, she doesn't convey Yuko's name until the group is drunk later on, and we don't see the updated sign until the day after that drunken night. The anime adds another flashback here amidst this already unique scene. The anime changes the dialogue here, cutting several lines and having Fi stand his ground instead of rushing to the sidelines, but that will be adapted next episode. Episode 19 covers chapters 37 through 39. The episode opens with Oroha's song, but the song differs between accounts. Also, the anime has her singing now while Kurogane and Fi are fighting, rather than singing while they are at Clover after this fight. Hence, much will be affected in later scenes and dialogue. The song segment also serves to take place in most of the duo's dialogue during the fight, and adds unique shots of Shaoran and Sakura at the cafe. The anime adds a shot of Fi turning around to see the demon attack. In the manga, the shot may have come from directly in front of him instead. The anime also lacks the big impact panels where Fi hits the wall. Also, in short, the fight sequence is altered as Kurogane is standing in different places, and some attacks or motions are cut or changed as well. The sword broke in two in the anime versus multiple pieces in the manga. The anime cuts a line by Kurogane. The anime lacks a piece of rubble between Fi's legs. The anime cuts the final portion of the scene, revealing the duo is actually right outside Clover. The anime cuts back to Shaoran, Sakura, and Mokona at the cafe, and the manga already covered this scene, and Mokona was upstairs talking to Yuko during it. The anime animates the bell ringing. In the manga, it is just heard. With Mokona here, she is given a line in place of one of the hunter's lines. Also, this conversation and scene is altered. Changed, we already cut, with Sakura greeting the hunters from the table instead of as she serves them drinks. Hence, the conversation in the anime is immediate while everyone is standing versus a little later while the hunters are sitting. The anime extends this fight sequence with a table also being destroyed. Since the anime covered Fi and Kurogane's fight, this scene is left uninterrupted and emphasis is added to Ryuo's sword. One page is entirely cut though, and how Ryuo is punched is different between accounts, with the anime adding him being grabbed too. Also, Shaoran's face is shown in the anime versus just a sweat drop effect in the manga. This conversation is altered, added, cut, changed, in part due to Mokona being present from the start and then changes in the previous scene. Sakura is cleaning a dish. In the manga, she's putting away a jar. Some shots of them moving the furniture are changed or cut from view. Shaoran seems surprised. In the manga, he reacts with a concealing smile. The anime cuts back to Clover. In the manga, the cafe scene wasn't interrupted for another few pages. Also, this conversation is altered, cut, changed, with heavy alterations due to Oroha having left for the night. Hence, the two have to come back later. In the manga, the two were told they'd have to wait until she was done singing, and the conversation continues from there. Mokona isn't on Sakura's shoulder as in the manga. Also, the anime uniquely focuses on Yuzuriha and Anuki for a moment. Meanwhile, this ensuing portion of the conversation is adapted from the next chapter, shifting talk of a new type of demon and Seishiro watching from afar to later in the episode. Ryuo and Shaoran's conversation isn't interrupted by several panels as in the manga, and lines are added to their conversation. Yuzuriha's finger motion might be aimed differently between accounts. Also, Sakura isn't flustered in her anime reaction as in the manga. The dishes and glassware are different between accounts. The anime doesn't show Sharon and Mokona as the manga does. The anime now covers that omitted portion of the conversation from earlier. Meanwhile, the manga had Mokona and Inuki sense demons outside, so everyone went out to face them. Sharon is given more of a reaction in the anime. The anime lacks a cool circular-like window on the second floor, among other small differences in architecture. The anime adds a unique sequence of Seishiro conjuring the demons for this next scene. Mokona is on the counter instead of on Sharon's shoulder. Also, Inuki isn't growling in the anime. Ryuo is given an extra line. Also, only Kusanagi says this in the anime, whereas the manga had all 4 hunters shout in unison. The anime also doesn't have everyone immediately rush out of the building. Again, the demon appearance has changed, this time significantly. These changes also slightly affect the fight sequences' visuals, which slightly differ between accounts. The anime says these are rank B4 demons. In the manga, they were A4 demons. Ryuo was given an extra line. More emphasis is added on Ryuo. The anime cuts dialogue by Sharon here and keeps the action going instead. Sakura looks toward Sharon. In the manga, she looks toward Yuzuriha. Also, Sakura isn't carrying Mokona in the anime as in the manga. The anime seems to omit Yuzuriha finishing reloading her gun here. The anime has a demon uniquely target Sakura instead of showing Soma and Ryuo moving in too for a 4-pronged attack. Hence, this anime scene is extended with Sharon trying to save Sakura. This shot is slightly different, featuring Ryuo in the background instead of the foreground, and Inuki also present next to Yuzuriha. This scene is altered, featuring a first aid kit for Sharon due to the last scene's changes. As such, the dialogue is also changed. This conversation is altered, cut, added, especially with regard to more "it's a game" foreshadowing in the anime versus Sakura treating Ryuo's wounds and an emphasis on the broken cherry blossom token in the manga. Seishiro says this while looking at Sharon directly. In the manga, Seishiro is turned around, but turning his head back toward Sharon. Hence, the floating away is slightly angled different. Fai is walking with the assistance of an arm around Kurogane. In the manga, Kurogane is carrying him like Shrek did Fiona. The anime lacks Sharon and Sakura's reactions to Fai being dropped. The anime cuts a line by Kurogane before adding another flashback. Kurogane's lines are changed. Soma's arms are by her side in the anime. In the manga, she has her right hand over her heart. The anime adds an extra shot of Kurogane. Much of the scene is heavily altered. The scene starts with Sharon being finished tending to Fai's wound, and the manga starts the conversation mid-bandaging. As such, much dialogue is reordered or changed in part due to the two not seeing or her that night. The anime also lacks the alcohol Fai brought home, so there are no drunken antics in the anime. The anime also covered the naming of the cat's eye earlier, so that is cut too. Also, Mokona is still wearing her apron in the anime, but isn't in the manga. Also, Sakura is only carrying 1 cup of tea instead of 3. Fai is still wearing his full outfit instead of ditching the coat as in the manga, and he also doesn't put his chin on his hand in the scene. The anime adds a unique scene of Seishiro at the cherry blossom tree. Kurogane is sitting outside alone and Sharon approaches. In the manga, the two were sitting outside together. Also, when the two do sit together in the anime, Sharon is sitting further forward so his feet touch the first step instead of the second step. Also, some sequences are changed due to a lack of alcohol present in the anime. The anime adds extra shots of Kurogane and Sharon in the sequence. The ending to the conversation is changed significantly due to the lack of alcohol in the anime, but some lines are retained. Episode 20 covers chapters 40 through 41. Since the last episode didn't feature alcohol, this opening scene and conversation are changed to involve just a sober group instead of a drunken group tending to the customers. The anime features a unique scene set of Fai preparing lunch for the doggies and having Sakura deliver the lunches. In the manga, she stayed and worked at the cafe all day. The anime omits the conversation before the two arrive at Shinan's. Also, the sign is different and might be called something slightly different. The weaponry might be different, but I won't cover in-depth background details much here. Shinan holds the sword with the hilt vertical, and the manga is horizontal. Some dialogue is possibly reordered, hence Chinon's answer might be to a different question between accounts. CHRoNiCLE is given an extra line. The anime cuts Xiaoran's hangover headache and adds a flashback a bit earlier than when CHRoNiCLE thinks it in the manga. Also, some of the next lines might be slightly changed. The way Xiaoran grabs the sword is different between accounts. Xiaoran is given an extra line, and the final portion of the conversation has some slight visual changes and doesn't feature San Yun bowing. CHRoNiCLE's first line might be changed. The anime focuses on the two for this line set. The manga focuses on the sword. The anime adds Xiaoran gripping the sword. Xiaoran is given an extra line. This shot is taken from the start of the chapter, hence its context is slightly different. Also, this is a unique anime scene featuring a Hanshin crossover and Fi purchasing a piano. In the manga, the cafe never had a piano. The anime shifts the scene from later in the manga to now, skipping the first training session the manga had in favor of adapting straight to the second. Also, the stone walkway on the water has 2 more stones. Also, the training sequence is slightly changed, with the first major change that a rock misses Xiaoran, but still causes him to fall into the water in the anime, versus hitting him in the face in the manga. CHRoNiCLE is holding the rock in the anime instead of juggling it in one hand as in the manga. Xiaoran says this while ashore. In the manga, he speaks while in the water. The anime adds a unique segment to this conversation, prompting Xiaoran to want to attempt the exercise again. In the manga, CHRoNiCLE moves straight into the blindfold exercise, which the anime will cover later. The anime adds a unique scene at the cafe. The anime adds a unique scene of Oroha at Clover. This continued unique cafe scene shows the anime-exclusive crossover characters Toya and Yukito. The manga, as mentioned, featured several crossover characters in the cafe from all over Clamps works, but not these two. As mentioned, the anime uniquely extends this training segment from earlier and then adds another unique scene with Fi and Sakura. This scene also introduces Fi's cane, but in the manga he uses more of a simpler crutch than a fancy cane. In continuing the unique scenes, the anime carries on with Sakura at the cafe with the piano, which leads into her singing to Oroha, which, although one of the best scenes in the anime, has no basis in the manga. This scene, of course, serves to show Chitose is watching over the game and Oroha is relaying data to her. The anime shows a closed sign since it is now night. In the manga, the sign read open as it wasn't yet closing time. Meanwhile, the conversation has been altered quite a bit due to the anime exclusive scenes. Xiaoran says this at the front door instead of the door by the bar. Some of Fi's lines are cut. The anime cuts to Sakura and Mokona heading to Xiaoran instead of Fi and CHRoNiCLE's conversation, as it was about the drunk night. The anime also makes this dialogue unique, as the manga only showed them for a couple panels while overlaying Fi and CHRoNiCLE's conversation. Also, Xiaoran is already passed out in the anime, and the manga he is awake and Sakura tends to his wounds. The anime then uniquely extends the scene with a small conversation by Fi and CHRoNiCLE. The anime adds a unique scene of Chitose checking Sakura's profile, hinting more again that this is a game and showing the angel eggs far earlier than the manga's account. Episode 21 covers chapters 36, 38, and 40 through 41. The clock tower's appearance differs between accounts, but more importantly, the clock must be broken because the clock reads either 11:49 or 10:49, but the hour hand is in the wrong position for either. The manga had the time at about 9:29. The anime adds lines by the couple and doesn't have them as Umi's parents. The demon's appearance differs between accounts. Okay, this clock is a clock of lies. Suddenly it strikes midnight, somewhat possible if it was 11:49 a moment ago, but the hand was still broken that shot. Also, the anime doesn't show the demon killing the man or changing shape. The anime adds extra specificity to where they are at. Since the cane is from Oto instead of one of the stilt crutches from Jade, the anime omits this part of the conversation and also omits another line by Mokona. The anime places extra emphasis on Mokona without showing she needed a boost from Fi. The anime also cuts the line. The anime omits another line by Mokona. The anime cuts to the blindfold training. In the manga, this took place immediately after the rock training, as such the location for the scene is different. The anime might add an extra remark by CHRoNiCLE, but definitely adds a line by Xiaoran. CHRoNiCLE is given an extra utterance. Also, I just noticed Heian's sheath might be slightly different between accounts. The anime cuts some more lines by Xiaoran in this scene. The anime slightly alters the visuals for the scene. The anime also cuts Shaoran's first remarks about his surroundings. The visual of Sakura is changed between accounts. The anime cuts some of Shaoran's thoughts and cuts an entire scene with Shaoran and Clamp's cats, along with a scene of Sakura and Fi with the same cats. The anime skips to Kurogane arriving home. The manga went through Shaoran's whole blindfolded journey first, hence the time of day also differs between accounts. Some dialogue is also changed slightly and reordered as Mokona seems surprised Shaoran isn't home in the anime instead of just happy one of the doggies is home in the manga. The anime cuts a line by Fi and doesn't have a customer call over Sakura. The anime also cuts the conversation short, in part because Kurogane and Fi hadn't met Oroha yet in the anime. The anime cuts Shaoran crashing into a trash can and his thoughts around that time. This change also affects what non-living item he senses, crates in the anime, the can in the manga. The demon barely misses Shaoran. In the manga it hit him. The anime also shows us the shape of the attacker before it is revealed. The manga keeps it a surprise. Also, the attack sequence is altered, featuring less strikes in the anime and an omitted thought by Shaoran. The anime cuts a line by Shaoran. The anime cuts a line by Ryuo and slightly removes Shaoran's sense of shock. The anime focuses on the lamppost instead of showing a blindfold exchange in the manga. The anime omits Shaoran shaking his head. The anime lacks Shaoran's scuffed up face. Ryuo pats his sword instead of unsheathing it. The anime extends the flashback sequence as he says this. The manga may have just been giving examples of the weapons rather than showing flashbacks. The anime focuses on the water a bit earlier than the manga. The anime adds scenic shots of different lands. The anime lacks an emphasis on Shaoran's right eye. The anime has Shaoran nod and utter an agreement. In the manga he doesn't nod and he might have an actual line. The anime has Sakura kneading dough. In the manga this was a scene from far earlier with Fi instead, whereas she was tending to customers at this time in the manga. As such, the anime dialogue is unique. The anime adds a unique walking scene, which will transition to Ryuo showing Shaoran someplace. The anime now has Kurogane and Fi arrive to Clover on time, and so will adapt the scene from earlier, albeit with alterations. The anime adds extra scenes during the song sequence. The positions they are sitting in are different between accounts. Also, they aren't drinking 4 leaves in the sequence as in the manga. The anime extends to ending the song. The anime also omits Caldina shaking a drink here. This conversation is altered. Added cut. Oroha's recollection of seeing Seishiro doesn't feature herself in the shot, and the time has changed from 2:19 to 11:36. And again, the clock has a broken hour hand. While the manga had cut the conversation here, the anime extends the conversation to adapt an off-screen conversation between Kurogane and Oroha on another night. The anime adds a unique scene of Seishiro conjuring demons. The anime continues to extend this conversation, including an alternate adaptation of that conversation at the cafe after Shaoran's first training session. This conversation not ending with a shot of Sakura's feather as in the manga. The anime adds a unique scene of the demons and Seishiro finding a bit of difficulty controlling them before he reveals Sakura's feather, causing Mokona to sense it. The manga doesn't reveal completely that Seishiro has the feather until the end of his fight with Kurogane and Adonis. The anime continues to add a unique scene of Sakura sensing her feather and heading after it, causing Yuzuriha to notice and follow. The anime adds a unique scene showing where Ryuo wanted to take Shaoran. In the manga, they were walking through this area naturally on the way to the cafe. Shaoran heads toward the clock tower in search of Sakura's feather, and Ryuo heads over because he senses demons nearby. In the manga, the duo hear screams from nearby and go to investigate. The anime extends the demon fight slightly and slightly changes the demon's appearance. Also, each hunter's line is said by the other one in the anime instead. Ryuo is given an extra line. One of Ryuo's lines is cut and another is added. The anime makes it more prominent that Shaoran is sensing Seishiro's presence among the other presences and adds the thoughts by Shaoran to match. Seishiro's location in the tree differs between accounts, and Ryuo is given an extra line. This line actually comes from when the two are retreating later in the manga. Xiaolin is given an extra start to his line. Also, Shishiro doesn't have a demon right next to him in the anime as in the manga, and the anime omits the visual effect of Seishiro and Xiaolin's blind eye. The anime also reduces the number of demons around Seishiro for his next line. The episode ends on a scenic shot of the demons instead of featuring an instant attack on the duo. Episode 22 covers chapters 41 to 44. Ryuo speaks of retreat before the demons can attack. In the manga, the demons attack first, hence a line is cut. The anime cuts Xiaolin's thoughts as they run away and had already moved Ryuo's line to earlier in the last episode. The anime includes a unique scene featuring Sakura's return. Due to this last change, this next scene and conversation are slightly altered, added, cut, and changed, including that the scene starts outside the cafe instead of as the two enter it. Also, Ryuo is standing and resting against the fence instead of sitting on the ground here. The anime adds another unique scene with Sakura. In the manga, Xiaolin thought more about Seishiro and went into a flashback sequence before Xiaolin immediately tells everyone at the cafe about Seishiro. The anime adds a unique scene with the demon hunters. The anime skips a Fei Wong sequence and moves straight to the next morning into a unique anime scene that will loosely adapt Xiaolin's lines about knowing Seishiro that the manga had him say to all the hunters earlier. The anime now briefly covers Xiaolin's flashback, which the manga covered the night before. The full flashback will be adapted later, though. Sakura checks on Xiaolin later on, and he has his arm up on the wall, not the glass as in the manga. The anime now covers Xiaolin's thoughts from the end of his manga flashback sequence from the night before and adds a flashback line by Seishiro and some extra thoughts by Xiaolin. The anime adds an utterance by Sakura. The anime now covers a Fei sequence the manga covered earlier. The anime omits Fei's other servants present in the manga scene. This scene also lacks the visual of Yuko and adds a line by Xinhua. Portions of this conversation are altered, cut, changed. Sakura's hood isn't up at first in the anime as in the manga. The anime shows us Xiaolin's injury. The manga's panel is too zoomed out to see any actual damage. The anime shows Sakura talking here instead of just Xiaolin's reaction. Xiaolin's hand is up during the scene. In the manga, it continued to face down. The anime skips the end to the conversation and a breakfast scene, and then instead moves straight to the city hall scene. Also, dialogue is added as they arrive. The anime adds a line by Xiaolin. Blanche's demeanor is happier looking in the anime versus more mysterious in the manga. You decide, though, which is more unsettling. Xiaolin's demeanor is calmer and more upbeat in the anime versus serious in the manga. More on Blanche's demeanor change. While she shows a smile at Xiaolin figuring out, in a sense, her programming riddle, she reverts to a mysterious mood in the manga and smiles again when finally able to relay information, whereas the anime keeps her all smiles throughout. Emphasis is added on the swords in the anime, and the two are holding them differently between accounts. The anime doesn't have Blanche specify the tower's name, and the picture lacks details that it is a map/guide sheet about the tower. This conversation is altered, cut, added. The scene's end also has them outside instead of inside, looking back and noticing 3 Blanches, thinking them triplets instead of reused digital assets. This conversation is altered, added, changed. Also, some visuals, including the lead-in panel and the specific dishes being washed, are cut or changed. The anime also only adapts the first part of this scene here, skipping Sakura passing out before the doggies arrive at the tower. The tower is larger in the anime versus the manga. Also, again, the anime doesn't specify the tower's name. The anime cuts a line by Xiaolin. Kurogene's line might be changed here. The anime shows Kurogane grip his sword instead of grinning as in the manga. This conversation is altered, cut, possibly changed. Also, Xiaolin is more serious in the manga depiction. Lines are also cut in the ensuing attack. Some visuals of the demons falling are changed. Also, the anime slightly changes how and when Kurogane resheaths his sword. Several portions of the scene are cut. Stairwell visuals are slightly altered, not featuring pillars in the anime. More thoughts are cut. This fight sequence is shortened tremendously in part since it wasn't cut for us to see Seishiro's attack on Fai. Also, a line is added and others are cut. The run visuals are changed slightly. The start to this conversation is unique in the anime. Also, some lines are reordered or slightly cut and some added. The anime has these demons as the same type as before. In the manga, they are different in appearance. The dialogue in the sequence is unique to the anime instead of the manga's dark take on the tower. Some lines are reordered and possibly slightly changed. CHRoNiCLE opens both doors by himself. In the manga, he opens one and Charon opens the other. The dialogue is altered in this overall scene. Cut, reordered, added. Also, obligatory rant, it is unforgivable not to cast Sandy Fox as Sumomo. Kotoko isn't waving Sumomo away in the anime as in the manga. This continued conversation is held sitting at the furnished part of the room. In the manga, it continued uninterrupted while they were standing. The anime omits CHRoNiCLE's thought on Sumomo. Some dialogue is reordered to make it more impactful that the A1 looks human. Just notice the anime lacks the wound on Charon's face here and in later scenes. The anime changes Charon's line. The anime now has Seishiro arrive at the cafe. In the manga, by this time, he has left the cafe. The anime cuts the start to this conversation. The anime uniquely emphasizes the piano here. The anime shows Mokona picked up, but lacks Phi raising her higher in the name of fun. Might as well say it, the anime lacks cool details of Sakura's sleeping. Her head position, the depression in the pillow, the bed head. The manga is still so much more realistic. The anime cuts back to the tower instead of continuing the Phi scene. This tower scene is a unique extension but does cover the manga's ending segment. Sumomo drops her tambourine and only states Seishiro has been located. In the manga, she doesn't drop the tambourine and instead senses Seishiro's killing of Phi, saying this occurred at the cafe. The anime changes Phi's line here. Also, the anime keeps Seishiro's eye looking normal for most scenes except when revealing its magic. The manga shows something looks different about it at all times. Episode 23 covers chapters 42 through 46. The anime inserts this unique scene extension instead of keeping the focus on Phi. The anime places added emphasis on Seishiro's eye earlier than the manga does. Given Mokona's location change, this line might be slightly different. While the demon's appearance is only fractionally altered, Seishiro's location in the room differs between accounts. The anime cuts to a unique scene of the doggies leaving the tower. The manga is mentioned they left after Phi quote-unquote died. The anime again uniquely utilizes the piano. Phi's injury and Mokona's line are reordered in this scene, and the scene will lack another attack before the conversation continues. Mokona doesn't hold fast to Sakura here as in the manga. The anime adds extra stills before uniquely extending the conversation, including adding a flashback sequence. The anime further extends this with Sakura's feather and Phi trying to dodge the attacks. In the manga, Seishiro simply said farewell and quote-unquote killed Phi in one strike. Also, Sakura woke up in the anime only, which will change more events later. Phi's quote-unquote death is different between accounts and is shown a bit more in the anime with an extra line by Mokona. The anime uniquely shows the feather's power messing with Oto's mechanics and overloading the NPCs. In the manga, this is only implied to have occurred, but it was never shown. The anime moves the scene up in the chronology, and the manga occurs after the doggies return to the cafe. The conversation is also altered, added, possibly changed slightly, with some character emphasis changed a bit. The anime lacks the thought bubbles of Little Cat and Little Dog. Ryuro notices Charon and CHRoNiCLE heading to the cafe. In the manga, Ryuro only notices Charon rushing to face Seishiro. The damage to the cafe is different between accounts, being more digitally corrupted in the anime. Sakura isn't present with Mokona at the cafe and has walked out in a trance to find her feather. The manga, the two stayed together while she remained unconscious. The anime adds lines by the doggies throughout the scene. Since the two were separated, Mokona rises from the couch instead of shouting from atop Sakura's pillow. This change also changes much of the rest of the conversation. The anime also doesn't feature CHRoNiCLE wondering if the demons ate Phi, alluding to their concerns from the tower. Hence, the Phi eaten scene was also a reference to this cut content. The anime also lacks Seishiro's message for Charon, which prompts his return to the cherry tree. The angle at which Charon grips his sword is altered. This line is changed since in the anime it is night, and the manga is still daytime, hence CHRoNiCLE will wait until sunset. The anime adds a bow by Shaoran before omitting lines as he leaves. The anime adds a scene of Seishiro with a feather. In the manga, he still isn't revealed to have a feather. Due to the Sakura change, the anime adds a line here. The anime adds Shaoran's shock. In the manga, he is silent and angry for a moment. The anime cuts some lines and flashback panels here. Also, Shaoran's pose is different between accounts. The anime adds extra lines by Seishiro as the anime transitions into the flashback scene. The manga had this scene way earlier under different circumstances. The anime heavily cuts and alters this flashback and its dialogue, changing much on how the thugs attack Shaoran before showing Seishiro intervening in a slightly different and cut manner. Shaoran grips the book to his chest in the anime versus his face in the manga. The anime changes some emphasis around throughout the scene, but more importantly, it emphasizes Shaoran's reaction here before he hands over the book with additional dialogue. Shaoran seems much happier in the anime depiction. He also lacks fight wounds in the anime. The anime's book pages are different than the manga. Also, the anime has Seishiro close the book here instead of far earlier as in the manga. Seishiro also doesn't give back the book here as in the manga. The anime cuts a line here by Shaoran. The anime has Seishiro uniquely repeat this line, possibly slightly different. The anime lacks the minuscule damage Shaoran's kicks do to the demons. The anime lacks the demon bird's call. The anime adds lines by Shaoran and Seishiro in this continued conversation. The anime adds a unique scene of Sakura searching for a feather, which will lead to inserted moments in Shaoran's fight as she watches. Shaoran's quote-unquote death is altered, featuring an aura surrounding him before digitally despawning him instead of him fading into an ooze as he despawns. The rest of the sequence aside from Seishiro's lines are also unique as Sakura chooses to quote-unquote die with Shaoran. In the manga, Sakura never woke up until after the group leaves Adanis. Episode 24 covers chapters 46 through 49. The anime opens on a unique scene with Seishiro summoning demons. The manga moves straight into Shaoran waking up in Adanis. The anime adds a unique scene of CHRoNiCLE meditating. This scene does still partially adapt a manga scene where CHRoNiCLE fights off demons at the cafe while carrying Sakura and Mokona, but the similarities are minimal, with different dialogue and a different appearance for the demon. As the scene continues adapting a portion of the CHRoNiCLE fight and the other demon hunters arriving, again the dialogue has been changed to match the anime events, and then a unique scene with Seishiro occurs. The anime cuts a line by Ryuo and adds lines by CHRoNiCLE and Mokona. The anime cuts the end to the conversation where Ryuo gets injured. The anime again makes the transition from virtual to reality more digital looking instead of ooze-like, with an extra line by CHRoNiCLE in the anime. The anime extends this reality transition. The anime now covers Shaoran waking up. Shaoran's clothes still aren't damaged from previous worlds, and the waking sequence is less flashy as he adjusts to seeing again. The anime cuts a line by Phi and reattributes a line by Phi to Shaoran. The anime uniquely has Phi point out Sakura since she woke from Oto as well. The manga has her with CHRoNiCLE. The anime also uniquely shows the capsules with CHRoNiCLE and Mokona. The anime adds a moving sidewalk. The manga just had them walking as normal. Also, this conversation is altered. Cut, slightly changed, reordered, added. The visuals of Fairy Park don't show how populated it is as in the manga, and crossover characters aren't shown. While still in the middle of this heavily altered conversation, Chitose appears from behind them. In the manga, Phi leads them to Chitose, hence more of the conversation is altered as a result. While normally I don't point out mirrored adaptations, Shaoran's hand has been switched to his right hand, which places a bit more emphasis on his headache rather than a mix of the headache and him trying to keep his left eye open. The dimension entering sequence is slightly altered, again showing a rift instead of Mokona spitting everyone out. Also, the landing in the capsules is slightly different between accounts. An announcer, possibly a recording, welcomes the group to the dream capsules rather than to Fairy Park. This being an impersonal exchange lacks the dialogue between the group and the crossover characters seen in the manga. More of the conversation is quite altered between accounts, blending and reattributing lines from a couple manga scenes. Also, the anime features some different flashbacks to the manga's accounts. Chitose uniquely leads them back to the capsule room. In the manga, they stay in the control room, but the anime continues to adapt portions of the manga conversation throughout. The anime adds a unique sequence of Kurogane and Mokona being removed magically from Oto and also of their capsules. The anime shows Chitose as recognizing Seishiro as bringing the game into reality. The manga, she does not know this is what's going on until Oto and Edinus collide. When the worlds do collide, unique lines are added in the anime, and of course the demon has changed between accounts, and the anime lacks the panic of the park goers. Also, the anime has the group rush out to the balcony upon the collision, whereas the manga has them watch from the monitors before Shaoran decides to find Sakura, and Chitose locates her on the monitors as well as Kurogane and Seishiro. Again, the anime is more digital than magical here, and again the anime lacks all the people running for their lives. This change will also affect where everyone stands in the continuing scenes. The anime adds extra lines by the hunters and possibly a line by Mokona. The anime changes the way Seishiro notices the hunters and cuts a line. Also, Seishiro hasn't and won't remove his hood for a while in the anime. Due to the Sakura change, Kurogane only leaves behind Mokona here in the anime. Also, the anime adds lines and possibly changes some too while cutting another. Also, his clothes show no damage as in the manga. The anime cuts the first lines to this conversation, in part because the audience already knows Sakura's feather is behind the worlds colliding. In the manga, we still don't know Seishiro has a feather. This change also affects more lines in the conversation. Also, again, this conversation is on a balcony in the anime, but in the control room in the manga. This location change forces the anime to spawn a holographic monitor to show where Kurogane is instead of using one of the monitors in the control room. Additionally, the anime only shows Kurogane, and so Shaoran only reacts to this. The manga showed Seishiro too, so Shaoran reacted to both. The anime lacks the shadow emphasis on Kurogane. The anime scene and conversation are altered, reordered, added, cut, with an emphasis on Yuzuriha seeing Sakura again instead of Shaoran reuniting with Sakura while she's passed out. The anime has a demon uniquely attack the group, which leads to a unique scene of rallying the demon hunters to fight with their abilities that have been brought into the real world too. The manga, the group instead watches Kurogane and Seishiro's fight until Yuko inadvertently interrupts it. The anime slightly extends the moment before Seishiro summons his sword. The anime continues with a unique scene of fighting the A3. The anime slightly extends this fight sequence and shifts around when the next dialogue occurs. The anime includes a unique magic attack by Seishiro. Since the anime events differed, Shaoran is now approaching instead of having been there for a while. The anime cuts a line by Kurogane explaining his curse, instead of Seishiro somehow knowing exactly what the curse is and specifying it, hence some lines are changed. The anime slightly differs in its depictions of the two preparing to strike again. The anime adds Shaoran heading up the stairs. In the manga, he never approached until after the fight. The anime has the two in the air rather than on the ground in the manga. The anime shows Mokona spitting out the bamboo. The manga only shows Mokona's mouth open afterward. The anime doesn't have the two stepping back from the mysterious shot fired as the manga does. The anime uniquely shows the two relaxing back for a moment with Kurogane grabbing the bamboo. In the manga, the bamboo is never shown being recovered, but we know someone grabbed it when the group has it in the next world. The anime alters this dialogue. Changes, cuts, reorders, adds. The anime uniquely inserts Shaoran explaining the situation. In the manga, the feather's power couldn't be contained anymore, and it emerged from Seishiro, revealing it was behind Oto becoming reality to everyone. The ensuing anime conversation is also mostly unique, having Seishiro call off the fight rather than Shaoran rushing off to get the feather. When Seishiro reveals the feather, he does so voluntarily instead of the feather becoming too strong to control for the moment. The ensuing dialogue is a mixture of lines from the manga and unique lines for the anime. The platform Seishiro is standing on is different between accounts. Also in the anime, Shaoran didn't jump to a floating platform, Hence, the next episode will feature a unique way for him to get high enough to strike at Seishiro. Seishiro's lines here are vastly extended. The anime adds everyone bracing as the A1 appears and has the A3 despawn. The presumably A2 demon's appearance has more bird-like than demonic wings, and its appearance overall is different. Specifically, in the manga, the demon is the crossover character Ray-Earth Fusion, whereas the anime's version is unique. Seishiro's lines are slightly different between accounts. Uraha is still wearing her first Oto outfit in the anime. In the manga, she is wearing a second outfit instead. The anime gives Sharon an extra line, and the ensuing conversation is altered. Reattributed, added. Episode 25 covers Chapter 49. The anime adds a unique extension to this conversation by several characters. The anime continues this unique scene with the extensive addition of the feather's power going out of control. The manga simply had the shorter conversation between Seishiro and Uraha go in uninterrupted. The anime continues to uniquely extend this conversation before loosely adapting a portion of the manga's version of the conversation. The anime uniquely adds demons attacking and subsequent scenes of fighting them, as well as Sharon having to climb the roller coaster to get high enough to jump to Seishiro. This will interrupt many later scenes as we watch him climb. And again, in the manga, Sharon was on a floating platform above Seishiro already. The anime omits lines by Kurogane and Fai and has Seishiro speak unique lines instead. Hence, some lines are changed too. But Kurogane and Fai are given slightly altered versions of their lines as they fight in the anime a moment later. Chitose and the Demon Hunters are given lines in the anime explaining Oto with slightly different dialogue and added lines by the others, including Kurogane having to recall Sharon's words since Sharon isn't with the others here in the anime as in the manga. In the manga, Uraha explains Oto instead with slight feedback from Sharon only. Seishiro asks Uraha for confirmation that she is a player character. In the manga, Uraha states this without prompting. The anime then cuts a page, moving straight into Seishiro's next question. Chitose explains this in the anime instead of Uraha in the manga. Also, the anime inserts this before Seishiro's next question. The anime also adds lines by Fai. As part of the unique scenes, Sakura is given a line. The anime adds emphasis to Seishiro's glasses. The anime reorders a portion of this conversation and adds some lines and slightly changes Seishiro's lines, including adding that the demons will remain. Hence, the conversation is extended beyond this too. In the manga, the additional demons never spawned or had to be fought. As a result of this last change, Shaoran's line has been changed. Shaoran is given extra lines, and the visual of Sakura is changed due to the differing accounts, with a line by Sakura as a result. The anime adds extra shots of everyone to extend the scene. The anime cuts lines by Seishiro. In addition to more shots of characters that are slightly changed or reordered, Shaoran says his lines before he unties and draws his sword versus during these events in the manga. Shaoran's stance is slightly different between accounts. The anime has these lines before showing Seishiro jumped out of the way. The manga shows Seishiro moved quickly to his left and then Ryuro speaks. Shaoran lands on Seishiro's floating platform, although it may be a different platform as the anime animated this inconsistently, and Seishiro lands on another platform, or maybe the same one, again inconsistent animation. In the manga, Seishiro didn't leave his platform and Shaoran lands on a nearby building. Seishiro's position is slightly different between accounts, but more importantly, the anime lacks him surrounded by fire as in the manga. The anime lacks a start to the dimension-traveling magic effects as in the manga. Also, Shaoran's reaction is slightly reordered in the anime. The anime reorders Shaoran and Seishiro's lines. The anime extends Seishiro's departure magic and adds shots of the others and a line by Sakura before unique lines by Mokona. In the manga, after Yuko's magic sent Seishiro away, Mokona's magic triggered, causing her to immediately start the process to travel dimensions. This last change adds a unique scene of demons spawning and the need to fight them off in the anime. The anime also adds unique shots of Fae throughout the sequence. Since Mokona is only now starting to be triggered by the magic, one of Fai's lines is cut. Also, other lines are cut since Sakura wasn't asleep for all this, with Shaoran given lines instead. Other lines and character emphasis are also cut. The anime adds a farewell between Yuzuriha and Sakura instead of Yuzuriha saying not to go. This last change also changes Ryuro's line. Also, some facial expressions are different, conveying a slightly different feel. The anime has everyone in the same spot before dimension hopping. In the manga, they are in different spots, but Mokona absorbs them all anyway. Also, the final visual of Edinus is rather different between accounts. The anime adds a unique scene of Fei Wong and Xinhua. Episode 26 covers Chapter 50. Most of this episode is anime exclusive, but the first difference of note is the final addition of a unique hourglass monologue for the season. The anime features a unique Fei and Xinhua encounter, adding a little extra depth to her character. But more importantly, the scene reveals the boy in the tube's identity far earlier than the manga does. The group arrive in Tsarastora Country. In the manga, they arrived in Idle Country. The anime has the bamboo note arrive for them to read. In the manga, Kurogane was carrying it with them and only considered it when the conversation focused on it. As such, most dialogue is different, but in each case, Fai says he can't read it, Mokona then reads it, and Kurogane's line is the same afterward. The note's words might be slightly altered between accounts. Also, I have to curse the dub again. It is completely cut the White Day message in favor of a generic foreshadowing for the episode's content. The anime features Sharon fainting from exhaustion from their adventure in Oto and Edinus. The manga never had him this tired. The anime also features a unique flashback sequence which will lead into a redacted version upon receiving Sakura's feather. The anime has Fei's soldiers protect the temple. While this episode is unique, the fights with these soldiers reinforces the anime's depiction that they are robots rather than the manga's living humans. Hence, if the anime followed the manga's depiction, Kurogane wouldn't be able to cut them down as he does, and at best could only knock them out or risk the curse upon him. The anime also features soldiers of Fei Wong never seen in the manga. The anime allows the god to bring back the dead, albeit temporarily, as Season 2 will show, due to the power of the feather combined with the god's power. In the manga, resurrecting the dead is impossible no matter what in any world, and only Fei Wong's master plan, which wouldn't be ready for several more world hops, would have a chance of breaking this rule by destroying the natural laws altogether. So, that is the entirety finished of Tsubasa RESERVoir CHRoNiCLE Season 1's anime versus manga comparisons. This has been so many changes. So, the next video, it seems like the voting is in, so we shall cover Hulk Season 2, as well as the Midsummer movie and the OVAs, before we move into Tsubasa Season 2, its Birdcage movie and its OVAs, and we'll see where we go from there in Clamp's works.